During this podcast, the four of us will be talking about the European Union and its economy.
For starters, what is the European Union? The European Union is an international body comprising 27 European states, which govern common social, security, and economic policies. Initially made up of strictly Western countries, the EU undertook an expansion toward the Eastern and Central states in the early 21st century. It houses members such as France, Germany, Italy, and up until 2020, the United Kingdom, which formally left the organization. Under the Maastricht Treaty, the European Union's objectives are to present a unified front by creating and implementing a single currency throughout its member states, the euro. After World War II, Europe was in a dire need of economic stability, and as an effort to integrate its countries, Western states sought ties with each other in order to achieve economic growth, along with the promotion of peace and reconciliation between France and Germany. It was so that six Western countries Belgium, France, Italy, Luxembourg, the Netherlands, and West Germany founded what was the precursor of the European Economic Community, the European Coal and Steel Community ECSC, which created a free trade agreement for various resources such as iron, coal, steel, coke, among others. It was until 1975 that six founding members of the ESCCS created the aforementioned European Economic Community, which created a common market that featured the elimination of most barriers to the movement of goods, services, capital, labor, the prohibition of most public policies of private agreements that inhibit market competition, a common agricultural policy, and a common external trade policy.
The creation of this agreement also led to the elimination of international tariffs amongst its members, along with the creation of laws and regulations that will benefit them. It is worth mentioning that the European Economic Union additionally established anti-monopolistic and anti-competitive common rules. It was until 1994 that the European Monetary Institute was established. This institution is a collection of policies whose purpose is to converge all the European Union members' economic plus. It carries out preparedness plans and establishes management for monetary policies. This entire European organization operates as a single market and is considered as a major trading power. Its policies mainly focus on the creation of jobs and boosting economic growth by smartly using their financial resources, making investment accessible by removing all types of obstacles and providing absolute transparency and assistance to investment projects. One may wonder how big it actually is an economic power, and well, according to its official site, in terms of total value of goods and services produced, the European Union's gross domestic product is 16.4 trillion euros as of 2019. Regarding trade, this organization, along with the United States and China, is one of the three greatest players in world trade. As mentioned earlier, one main objective of this organization was the creation of jobs, and it is evident that these past few years, after the European debt crisis from 2008, the employment rate has exponentially increased. Now, concerning said crisis, experts agree that as much legal and financial frameworks that the European Union established, after throughout financial analysis, a large-scale crisis was inevitable.
One of the greatest threats to the global economy in 2011 and 2012, the European debt crisis became and still is proof to many of a lack of the euro's viability. This crisis began with Greece realizing it could default on its own debt, and in only 3 years it escalated to other countries such as Portugal, Italy, Spain, and Ireland. During this period, financial institutions collapsed and governments accumulated large amounts of debt. A major cause of this crisis was the collapse of the Great Financial Recession of the US in 2008, which affected global trade and economics. The aforementioned countries were unable to finance their own governments and piled up debts that surmounted more than they could realistically handle. As soon as the other European countries observed the situation, bailouts from the European Central Bank were in place along with the financial support of countries such as Germany and France. Plus, the International Monetary Fund also took action. Countries receiving financial support were forced to meet austerity measures in order to stop the public sector from growing too much. The course of action taken by the European Union in order to handle this crisis has been and still is criticized by many as a short term solution that is not able of completely dealing and ultimately eradicating the problem, and instead it just postpones a real solution. Even though some may think this problem affects only European countries, it has been affecting to this day world economics, as its consequences extend beyond their borders, and in order to regain international trust and to enable the Eurozone's financial stability, the European Union must show a sustained growth in the near future.
After the crisis was eventually controlled by the financial graduates of European countries, who feared the collapse of the euro financial connection, and by the International Monetary Fund (IMF). Rating agencies also downgraded several eurozone countries' debts. The austerity measures we talked about earlier took a great toll on the political picture across the euro. It was the more that around 17 members saw their government collapse or change ruler. There were lots of prevention measurements that were implemented in order to keep this from ever happening again, such as the integration of over 6,000 financial institutions under the supervision of the European Central Bank, which will centralize even more the economy of all member states, along with the creation of what is known as European Stability Mechanism, which is a permanent bailout fund system in case another situation like this were to happen. In order to recover this crisis, a plan towards economic growth and stability was urgently needed. Many solutions were proposed, some of which defeat the initial proposals of European Union, such as loan banking regulation, more investments was encouraged, and less austerity, increased competitiveness, and lastly, address current or future account imbalance.